Doing this video, I thought it might give some of you that didn't live through this dark time an understanding of how dark it was. Now, I'm going to stay away from other things Lucasfilms were doing, like in 1989 they released a new Indiana Jones movie. Not going to tell you what the other actors were doing. I'm going to focus on Star Wars merchandise. And I'm not going to list every single thing released that year, just touching the highlights. So if I don't mention a comic book that you love, you don't have to yell at me in the comment section below. But let's go back to 1985, the start of the end.
Next Saturday morning, there's something brewing.
Chihuahua.
As everything was wrapping up, some things were beginning. We've got the Ewoks and Droids cartoon premiering. Now, I was a little too old for this in 1985. Never really cared about it. In fact, I never even watched them until, I think last year, I did a reaction video of me watching one of the Droids episodes. Never really got into this. Also, in 1985, we got the second Ewok television movie. So, Star Wars was dying, so they were still trying to push out stuff for the kids with the Ewok movies, the Ewok cartoon, and the Droids cartoon series. So let's move on to 1986. Finally, you could put away that Star Wars A New Hope soundtrack vinyl because Star Wars A New Hope finally got released on CD. This is kind of surprising because Lucasfilm usually likes to wait around to see how a new format does before he releases it. Took forever to get Star Wars on DVD, but here in 1986 we got the release of the soundtrack of A New Hope on CD. But as things were ending, some things were starting up. The Hamilton Plate Collection released their Star Wars collectible plates. The first one to be released, Han Solo. I don't know about you, but I love to eat some scrambled egg and grits off that in the morning. So we're done with 1986. Not much there. Let's talk 1987.
I see they're loading our navigator R2-D2, and then we'll be on our way. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the flight.
Star Tours 45, elevator platform has been activated. Commence final pre-launch sequence.
Roger, Control.
Disney took on Star Wars when they opened the 3D theme park ride Star Tours. Also that year, the fan club dropped down to 5,000 members, and Lucasfilm closed down the official Star Wars fan club, releasing the last of their monthly magazine, Bantha Tracks. But don't worry, they did start up Lucasfilm Fan Club. Also starting up in 1987, West End Games released the source book for their role-playing Star Wars game. This really helped Star Wars fans learn a lot more about Star Wars. This was the first really detailed book about characters, planets, and everything you wanted to know. Now, 1988, Glasslight, yeah, that's how you say it, released the official last vintage Star Wars action figure. Who was that they released? Velix. I think that's how you say it. Velix? I've heard it pronounced different ways. Anyway, this figure was only released in Brazil. So today, if you had this figure, it's worth a lot of money. A lot of money. I could find nothing major released in 1988 from Star Wars. 1989, we're going to go back overseas. Star Tours hit Tokyo. Also that year, not something released, but pretty neat, Star Wars A New Hope was one of 25 films inducted into the National Film Registry at the Library of Congress. Well, now it's a new decade. Time to box up those Cabbage Patch dolls and throw away that Rubik's Cube. It's the 90s. I only could find one good thing to talk about here also. Lucas Fan Club released a bronze Yoda statue, but only made 50 of them and the retail price was $500. That's about all I could find. Now, I might have missed something, but there was nothing major released in 1990. But don't worry, the flood was coming. 1991, Star Wars returned to the bookstores with Timothy Zahn's Heir to the Empire. This novel hit #1 on New York Times best-selling list. A lot of people at this time had already brushed Star Wars off, or it only had a small niche audience. But this proved there was a market out there for Star Wars, and they were looking to buy anything they could. Ending out 1991, Nintendo jumped on the bandwagon, releasing the Star Wars video game. Comic book company Dark Horse released their sequel to Return of the Jedi, Dark Empire. As you can see now, there was starting to be water at the dam, but it still hadn't busted. 1992, Star Wars novels was a hot thing. With the success of Timothy Zahn's Heir to the Empire, Lucasfilms was throwing books all over the toy store. Lucasfilms were releasing all kinds of books. Besides Timothy Zahn's sequel to Heir to the Empire, Dark Force Rising, there was other books also released, such as The Glove of Darth Vader. 1992 ended much like 1991. Nintendo again released a Star Wars video game. This time they released Super Star Wars for the Super Nintendo. And Dark Horse was back again with Dark Empire #2. In 1993, the water at the dam was getting to the top. We were getting all kinds of stuff, but I still technically wouldn't call the dark times over just yet. LucasArts released 2 PC games of Star Wars. First up, Star Wars X-Wing, and the other, Rebel Assault. Nintendo continued their yearly Star Wars game, releasing Super Empire Strikes Back for the Super Nintendo. Just Toys returned Star Wars to the toy aisles with their Bend-'em action figures. And the Topps Trading Card Company got into the act, releasing Star Wars Galaxy Trading Cards. If you were a Star Wars fan in 1993, the dark time was over for you. As for Dark Horse Comics, they were still releasing Star Wars comic books, such as Tales of the Jedi, and Galoob expanded the toy market of Star Wars with their Micro Machine collection. If you were a Star Wars fan in 1993, the dam probably busted right here. But if you were just a common Star Wars fan that didn't hang out on a Friday night at a comic book store or your Saturday nights at a Toys R Us, you probably didn't realize the return of Star Wars. Let's look at 1994, a year before the dam would bust. It was comic books and novels was the big thing. Seems like every month or every week there was a new comic or novel released. There was novels such as The Courtship of Princess Leia, Jedi Search, and Dark Horse revamped Droids and released a comic book based on A New Hope. Once again, Nintendo finished off the year releasing their Super Return of the Jedi game, again for the Super Nintendo. And Kenner, now under Hasbro, would test the water with Star Wars toys with their Star Wars Action Master diecast line. And now, here we are at the final year of the dark times, 1995. This is the year where even the casual Star Wars fans knew, and it was selling big. Kenner, again under Hasbro, released for the first time in over 10 years Star Wars action figures with their Power of the Force line. Not to be confused with the Kenner 1985 Power of the Force line. Still not really sure why they kept that name around. I guess they just wanted to confuse people on eBay. And the PC got a new game with their Doom-like Dark Forces. Of course, you got more book releases like Children of the Jedi or Heirs of the Force. And it was announced that work on the first Star Wars movie, the first prequel to Star Wars, Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, had started. Also in 1995, Lucasfilm released Star Wars on VHS for the last time in their original cut. And Lucasfilm announced to celebrate the 20th anniversary of Star Wars, all 3 films would be released in 1997 with new special effects. So it was clear Star Wars was back. The toys were selling, the books were selling, the comic books were selling, the films were being re-released in 2 years, and there was a lot of hype about Episode 1. The dark time was over. And it seems, since then, it hasn't ended. I hope you made it through those dark years okay when you couldn't go into a grocery store and find a Star Wars fruit roll-up. I'll be back again with another video very soon. As always, hit subscribe, ring that bell, leave some comments, and let's talk Star Wars.
Hey, Junkman channel popping though.
Thank you, sir, for that unsolicited testimony.